So I'm going to start by playing a video which was made by Hamish. So hopefully that's helped explain the little gizmos that I was handing around. So one of them is the unphone, which is a thing that's very much like a mobile phone, but it's not. So it's an unphone and an expansion sort of card for that. And then the other device is a water elf, which is part of the aquaponics that we've been working on. So just to zip back in time, about 5 years ago, I got a phone call asking for help with an aquaponics system. I knew nothing about aquaponics, but I spent an hour on Google and I felt confident enough to say, yeah, sure, I can build some electronics that will help you manage your aquaponics system. So fast forward about 5 years and I'm still working on it. But since then, I've managed to start collaborating with the University of Sheffield and then with Pimoroni. And it's all about aquaponics. So I hope you got to see some of those slides, but it's basically fish and plants. So instead of needing fertilizers, artificial fertilizers, you can use fish waste, wee and a bit of poo. And that's great for lots of reasons, but particularly because you don't need to use energy to make fertilizers. So I'm sure most of the people in this room probably know, but lots of people don't appreciate that our food sort of depends on artificial fertilizers mostly, and they need a lot of energy, and that's a big problem, and that's one of the things that aquaponics is really good at solving. So it provides the fertilizers sort of for free after you feed the plants, fish, sorry, they feed the plants. And these are plants that were grown aquaponically in a project in Todmorden called the Incredible Aqua Garden, which was a spin-off of the Incredible Edible project. Sadly, they ran out of funding a few years ago, but they grew a fantastic range of fruit and veg, and helped get me launched into aquaponics. So I had the bug completely bitten by now, so spent several years iterating over kind of controller designs, and we were fortunate enough to work with Gripple, that should say, a manufacturing company in Sheffield, a really great company, and they wanted a green wall for their latest factory, because that's the kind of manufacturing company they are. So we built them a green wall that was originally designed to be an aquaponics green wall, but actually when it came to it, the systems had to be separated. So this is actually a hydroponic green wall by now. But each one of these was intended to be like a pixel. So there's a kind of 10 by 7, 70 pixel grid of plants, each with individual watering control. And it was supposed to be like pixel art, so you could sort of paint with plants, and you know, it's quite a good looking thing, really. This is the aquaponics system at Healy City Farm, which this is it being installed, so nothing growing there. And you saw very much like the video, although a bit less glam. This is simply an IBC, which is a water container that's the kind of global standard. You find them in every corner of the planet. You just cut those and they turn into your growing beds. And another one of those things, just with a bit of metal cladding at the back, is the fish tank. You fill them up with, you can use gravel if you're on a budget. If you've got a bit of cash, like I think the university had a bit of grant money, so they splunged on some hydroponic growing beans, which are great because they've got really high surface area and they help the bacteria, which are an essential part of the system. And yeah, there's John helping plant some of our wasabi, I think that is.
Yes.
And here it is a good 6-9 months later, doing quite well. And I think this is the latest one. This was just the other day. The wasabi is actually doing the best of all the plants that we've planted. And we're quite excited about that one because it's a high value crop. So if there are good roots under there, I haven't dared look yet, that's not my department, but if there's good roots there, then that could be potentially a sort of high value crop. This is another little project we got involved with. Farm Urban, a great organisation in Liverpool, do these educational projects, and they do this little aquaponics kit. This is a tabletop kit made from a couple of IKEA buckets, and oops, wrong way. And that has now found home in my front windowsill. And it's growing chilies and lemongrass. So if I want to cook a Thai curry, I just go to the front window and chop off a stalk of lemongrass, and it's really lovely. So this is an example of the electronics in use. This is in the controlled environment in Sheffield, in Arthur Willis Environment Centre, where there was a research sort of system for a while. And this is the research tomatoes, just being sown, I think. And this is the research tomatoes doing really quite nicely, thank you, ticking along. And this is what a software bug looks like when your system, actually sorry, no, this is the software bug, sorry, this was the hardware bug. When, yeah, you have problems with your system, things can go wrong, you know. This is the offending article, or rather this was the prototype of the offending article, a water valve. So in those beds with the gravel, we arrange for the water to gradually flood the bed, and then after a few minutes when it's flooded, we then drain it away. Because the water contains all the nutrients for the plants. This is a hydroponic, soil-less system, so we need to get the water in there, and because it's a fairly low concentration, we need quite a lot of water quite a lot of the time. But we also need oxygen. Plants need a lot of oxygen to their roots to help maintain growth. And actually, not having enough oxygen is one of the main limiting factors to soil-based growing. And one of the reasons that hydroponic and aquaponic growing is typically twice as productive as growing in soil is to do with the oxygen. So we need to have some dry time as well to let the roots have as much oxygen as we can, so we can get as much sort of yield out of our plants. So my search for a valve led me from that homemade one to a manufactured one, which is actually designed for a toilet. But that's great because it means they're made in their millions.
Okay, that's not good.
And this one has a very nifty air push button that we can subvert to control it remotely.
What's more with feeling?
And yeah, I was really delighted when I found that because I thought, oh, all my homemade valve woes are over. I can buy these things off the shelf. They're 12 quid. They're even made in Doncaster. I was put them in the system, growed the tomatoes, lovely jubbly. Then they started failing. And I think what it was is that they work fine in a clean water system. As you know, we all flush our toilets with grade A, wonderfully clean water. But once you put a bit of algae and a bit of muck through these things for a few weeks, they just don't work very well anymore. So back to the drawing board with the valves. And just to finish up, really, these are some of the sensors we use. So this is a humidity one, water temperature, light, and this is the valve control and the water level sensor. And that's what it looks like, a bit of a robot eyes on the front. So these sensors are all brought together into that was a very early version with lots and lots of shields and sort of things all tacked onto each other. All these sensors brought together, and this is a more next revision, and this is the version that I've got around, version 6. So that's it in a pretty box, and these are all integrated. I hope I've got a shot of the dashboard. Yeah, you can see it up there, and I think there's one here. So you get to bring all the data to look at the system right now. And that's great because if you don't live in Healy and you want to check that your system's okay, you can pull out your phone rather than having to go over to Healy to look in the polytunnel to see how things are. It's also great if you're learning, you're beginning, because most people don't know much about aquaponics. If you've got any problems, you can ask someone else to log on to your system and see how it's going. You can also log the historical data so you can see, what the trends are and work out how much energy you're having to put in to keep your water at 18 degrees. There's quite a lot of advantages to the data side of things, and it's not all about big data, artificial intelligence, all those other sort of fancy things. I like to emphasize the social aspect of it as well, that having this, for a certain demographic, you can imagine it sort of pulling out the app and showing it off in the pub, and I'll just check on my fish, and and it's got that social element as well of being able to get advice as well as sort of strutting your stuff. So I think that's a nice advantage of the tech, as well as being all data-y. It's got a social aspect as well. So yeah, any more questions? Feel free to ask me, and thank you.